This happened about 3 weeks ago. I was 26 years old and just graduated from mortuary science school. I needed a part-time job to gain experience. The crematorium was on the edge of our small town, surrounded by tall grass and old gravestones. I thought it would be a quiet place to work. I remember breathing in the faint scent of incense as I stepped inside those stark white walls. The fluorescent lights flickered on and off. Felt odd, but I didn't think much of it. On my first night, everything started out normal. I checked the schedule and looked over some files. I prepped the area for what I thought was a standard night shift. I even told myself it was just like school, just with less pressure and fewer students. Then I heard a soft sound coming from the furnace room. It was a radio playing a song I thought I recognized. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just an old speaker malfunctioning. Maybe it was just a one-time thing. As the days passed, things began to change. I started hearing sounds at odd times. I'd be moving around the building, and each time I passed a door, it creaked open. There was nobody around. It made me feel uneasy. The lights flickered more often, making me jump every now and then. I thought I saw shadows darting in my peripheral vision, but when I turned, nothing was there. Then the whispers began. It was faint at first, almost like static. I swore I heard my name being called. I tried to convince myself it was just the radio glitching again, but the whispers grew louder and clearer. They sounded desperate. "Jack," they would call. I thought maybe I was just stressing over my new job, but I couldn't shake it. On a particularly late night, when I was the only one there, I felt a chill run down my spine. The whispers were so close. It felt like they were right behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nobody there. My hands started to shake. I forced myself to focus on my work, trying to keep busy. Suddenly, I felt a cold wind brush against my neck. The lights flickered again, and the room felt like it was closing in on me. I followed the sound of the whispers toward the furnace room, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. I'll never forget pushing the door open. The dim light inside cast shadows that seemed to shift. Just then, as the whispers crescendoed, the radio went dead. I stood in silence, frozen. Then I heard a voice, clear and unmistakable. "Why are you here?" It sent chills through my body. I didn't respond because I was too scared. When I finally found my voice, I managed to say, "I'm just working." But the room was empty. The shadows settled back into the corners as if they never moved. To this day, I'm not sure what happened that night. I haven't stopped thinking about it. What followed me home, if anything? Moments like that can't just disappear, can they? The whispers sometimes echo in my mind. I wonder if they were trying to tell me something. Part of me hopes I never find out. The following night, I went back to the crematorium. I tried to shake off the memory of the voice that had confronted me. My mind kept playing tricks on me. I arrived earlier than usual, hoping the sunlight would ease my anxiety. The lingering scent of incense still hung in the air as I walked through the cold, empty halls. As I settled into my shift, I forced myself to focus on the paperwork. I had a stack of files to go through, but every time the lights flickered, my fingers froze over the pages. I glanced around, half expecting to see shadows creeping back into sight. I couldn't ignore the sense that something was watching me. Around midnight, the furnace roared back to life. I should have felt comforted by the familiar sound, but instead, it sent a jolt of panic through me. I tried to drown it out by turning on the small radio perched on the desk. It crackled to life, but the familiar tunes felt distant. In my mind, I could see the darkened furnace room, the shadows gathering like storm clouds. Then the whispers returned. They were softer this time, almost conspiratorial, creeping under the noise of the radio. They seemed to swirl around me, pelting me with a mixture of urgency and despair. "Jack! Jack!" Heart racing, I reached for my phone to check the time, but the screen remained dark. I pressed the button repeatedly, but it didn't respond. A surge of frustration fueled the fear creeping up my spine. I rolled my shoulders back, fighting the tremors in my hands. I couldn't let this control me. Determined to confront whatever was happening, I grabbed a flashlight and marched toward the furnace room. As I approached the heavy door, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. I hesitated for a moment, my breath quickening. What if I heard it again? With a surge of courage, I threw the door open. The room was dark but for the light spilling from the furnace. The shadows danced wildly against the cold walls. When I saw it. A figure, translucent and barely there, stood in the corner. I froze, the flashlight trembling in my grip. It seemed to flicker in and out of existence. My heart pounded at the sight, yet part of me felt drawn to it. I stepped further inside, trying to understand. As I got closer, the figure turned its head toward me. The face, pale and haunting, held an expression of deep sorrow. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, the whispers turned into weeping. "Help us." The figure mouthed silently, its eyes filled with a pain that wound itself around my chest. Just as quickly as it appeared, the figure vanished, leaving only silence behind. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, and then everything went dark. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for the door, tripping over the threshold as the shadows closed in. I was not alone. It was clear that whatever was in that room wouldn't let me go easily. What had I opened myself up to? I had to know, but dread gnawed at me. I had unwittingly stepped into a story much larger than just my job. I could feel it, the weight of untold tales nesting in the air, waiting for someone to listen. I stumbled out of the furnace room, heart racing. The darkness pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. I could hear the furnace crackling, but the warmth felt foreign on my cold skin. All I wanted was to escape. My mind raced with questions. Who was the figure? Why was it asking for help? I rushed back to my desk, fighting the urge to look over my shoulder. The dim glow of the radio offered little comfort, but it was better than the oppressive silence surrounding me. I needed answers. Maybe there were records of past workers or incidents that could shed light on what I had just encountered. I pushed the files aside, frantically searching for anything that would guide me. My hands trembled as I rifled through pages filled with names and dates. But then something caught my eye. A file marked unsolved cases. It was stuffed in the back, almost as if it had been hidden away on purpose. Opening it, I found details about the crematorium's darker history. Stories of strange occurrences and disappearances. Most chilling was a section on a group of workers who had vanished years ago, their names lost in time. No bodies were ever found. I felt a chill run down my spine. Was the figure one of them? Suddenly, the lights above flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. I grabbed my flashlight, heart thumping loudly in my chest. When the lights returned, what I saw made my blood turn cold. The file was gone. I stared at the empty spot where it had been, panic clawing at my throat. Had I imagined it? No, I could feel the weight of the lost stories pressing down on me. They wanted to be heard. Just then, a noise came from the furnace room, heavy, like something scraping against metal. I swallowed hard, torn between the overwhelming need to understand and the instinct to run for my life. Another long moment passed, then I stood up. Whatever it was, I had to confront it. I made my way back toward the furnace door, each step heavy with dread. As I approached, I felt the air grow colder. My breath formed wisps of fog in front of me. I gripped the flashlight tighter and pushed the door open again. The room looked the same, but I felt different. The shadows seemed more alive, swirling in a chaotic dance. I called out, my voice shaking. "Is anyone here?" Silence. Then, a soft weeping returned, echoing from within the shadows. It was unmistakable. The figure, I realized, had come back. I stepped further into the room, examining every corner. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, fear mingling with determination. Suddenly, the furnace roared to life, sending a heat wave crashing into me. I stumbled back, and the figure appeared again just as before. But this time there was something else. A sense of urgency in its eyes, and a deeper sorrow wrapped in its presence. Then, without warning, the figure pointed toward the furnace. It was a clear, direct motion. My breath caught in my throat. What was inside? I had to know, but dread pressed against my chest. And then, amidst the heat and shadows, I knew I was about to uncover the truth, whether I liked it or not. The figure's silent plea hung in the air, heavy and charged. I stood frozen, heat radiating from the furnace, my flashlight flickering as if it were as terrified as I was. I took a cautious step forward, drawn to the furnace by a mix of fear and curiosity. "What's in there?" I muttered under my breath. My hand shook as I lifted the flashlight, its beam piercing through the rising heat and shadows. The figure seemed to nod, urging me closer. I felt a surge of defiance. I wasn't going to let fear dictate my actions. I had already come this far. I needed to know the truth behind the figure's sorrow. With a deep breath, I approached the furnace, the heat growing more intense around me. I wiped sweat from my brow, steeling myself for whatever I might find. As I reached the furnace door, trembling fingers wrapped around the handle. It was surprisingly cool to the touch, and it didn't take much to pull it open. The door creaked, a mournful sound that echoed in the cramped space. My heart raced. What if I found remnants of the past? Inside, it was dark. I could just make out the shapes metal shelves lining the sides, empty or appeared to be. But then I saw something in the corner, partially obscured by shadows. A strange bundle lay there, wrapped in tattered cloth. I leaned closer, drawn by a tangible gravity. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and as I moved the beam of the flashlight over the bundle, my breath hitched. Beneath the cloth lay objects that gave me chills. Old wedding rings, photographs, even a stuffed toy, all relics of lives that once were. Suddenly, I heard a voice, faint and haunting. A whisper carried on the air. "Help us." The figure was at my side, its eyes pleading. I looked from the bundle to the figure, comprehension dawning. These were remnants of those who had vanished. Terror flooded me again. Who had they been? How did they end up here? "What do you want from me?" I asked out loud, my voice barely rising above the crackling of the furnace. "I can't help you." The figure seemed to dissolve before my eyes, becoming nothing but a wisp of shadow again. A feeling of emptiness filled the air where it had stood. The whisper grew stronger, louder. "Help us before it's too late." Panic surged within me. I felt trapped, not just in that cramped furnace room but in a web of unresolved histories. I was at the center of something bigger, and I had no idea what it meant or what was at stake. Just then, the warmth from the furnace shifted, the air thickening as if it were being sucked into some unseen void. I stepped back. Something was coming. Then, just as suddenly as it started, silence enveloped me again. I peered into the darkness, my heart pounding. I had to make a choice: continue unraveling this horror or escape before I became part of the forgotten. But what if the answers lay too deep within me to ignore? I had to find out. I had to uncover the truth about the workers and what had really happened here. With renewed determination, I turned back to the furnace, ready to face whatever lay within. It was time to understand. That's when everything went dark. I blinked, trying to adjust to the darkness that now swallowed me whole. The flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls. Panic clawed at my throat. The figure, the objects, the whispers, they all vanished in an instant. It felt as if the world around me had flipped upside down. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. No answer, just a thick, heavy air pressing against me. I swallowed hard. I could either stay in this oppressive darkness or find my way back to the exit. I chose the latter, but as I turned toward the door, something caught my eye. A faint glimmer pulled my gaze back to the furnace. The darkness had shifted, revealing a crack in the floor. I knelt, peering down. A narrow beam of light broke through, illuminating the jagged edges of what appeared to be an underground tunnel. My heart raced. What lay beneath? I hesitated, knowing I should retrace my steps. But the call from the unknown felt strong, like a thread tugging me in. "Help us" echoed in my mind. I needed to know, I needed to understand. I crawled closer to the crack, my chest tight with fear and excitement. Suddenly, a sound erupted from behind me, a scraping noise, slow and deliberate. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. The air shifted again, colder now, as if a breeze had snuck in. I turned slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. That S when I saw it. At the edge of the light stood a shadow, tall and thin. It wasn't he the figure I had seen earlier, but something else. Felt darker, more malevolent. I swallowed hard, my breath quickening. "Who are you?" I stammered. My voice sounded small, barely a whisper. The shadow didn't answer. Instead, it stepped into the light. The flash revealed a face, twisted and hollow, eyes sunken deep into its skull. A soft, sorrowful sound escaped its lips, like a lamentation of souls lost. "Help us," the voice echoed again, chilling my bones. I backed away, heart hammering against my ribcage. My instinct screamed for me to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. Reality crashed down. Maybe I was truly meant to help. But how? What did it want from me? As if sensing my thoughts, the shadow stretched its arms out, beckoning with an urgent plea. Then it flickered, like a dying light, and whispered, "Find the truth." The darkness around me grew thicker, stifling, suffocating. I felt like I was drowning in despair. I was torn between fleeing and finding out more. But before I could decide, something shifted in the air. The shadow lunged forward, disappearing into the space between us. My instincts kicked in and I bolted towards the door. Just as I reached for the handle, the ground beneath me trembled. I stumbled, heart racing, as I realized I was no longer alone in that furnace room. Someone else was here. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. I was trapped. I pressed my back against the cold door, my heart thumping wildly. The room was dark, and now I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me. I needed to think, to come up with a plan. But all I could feel was the surge of panic. Suddenly, I heard movement, soft but deliberate, like the scuff of shoes on tile. I squinted into the shadows, but my flashlight flickered again, barely illuminating the corner of the room. I strained to catch a glimpse, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be lurking in the dark. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. But there was no answer this time. Instead, the sound increased, a shuffling followed by a low, guttural whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt the chill wash over me again. Whatever was in here was closing in. I had to do something. I took a couple of cautious steps toward the furnace, hoping to find something to defend myself with. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my instincts screamed to turn and flee. But the glimmer from the tunnel still beckoned me. That moment of hesitation cost me. From the right side, a figure popped into the beam of my dying flashlight. It wasn't the shadow I had seen earlier, but a silhouette of a man, his face obscured and expression unreadable. Fear seized me. "Get away from me," I shouted, my voice cracking. But the figure didn't move closer. Instead, he just stood there, still as a statue. All I could see were the reflections of his eyes, staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Help us." The voice was different this time, less mournful, but more insistent. I couldn't tell whether the man was threatening or pleading. My throat tightened as I took a step back, too terrified to consider my options. Then, in a swift motion, he pointed toward the crack in the floor. My pulse quickened. Maybe this was the answer. Maybe this was what the shadow wanted. But as I considered it, the atmosphere shifted, cold and clammy, a warning that things were about to change. Without warning, the lights flickered again and the room dimmed even more. In that split second of darkness, I felt a rush of wind, as if something had passed through me. I blinked and saw shadows flash against the walls, dancing and twisting out of my reach. "Please," the figure rasped, the distance between us closing just a bit more. "You must find the truth." In a moment of clarity, I realized that running would get me nowhere. I needed to confront this. "What truth?" I shouted into the dark, desperation growing. "What do you want from me?" The man's gaze shifted, and I felt a tug at my heart. It was like he was trapped in an eternal fate, just as I felt like I was spiraling into one of my own. Then, with a sudden movement, the man lunged, and just as quickly, he disappeared, as though he hadn't been there at all. I was left standing alone with my racing thoughts, the shadows settling back into their corners. And then I heard a faint echo of laughter, chilling and cruel. It reverberated through the room, wrapping around me like a noose. Desperation clawed at my insides. Something was coming for me. I had no idea what it wanted, only that time was running out. I stood frozen, feeling the weight of the dark pressing in. The laughter faded, but my heart raced louder. I had to move. My eyes darted around, searching for a way out, but the weight of each second felt heavy as concrete. Just then, I heard another sound, a soft scraping, like nails on wood. It came from the corner where the light barely reached. I edged closer to the source, my instincts pulling me in. Part of me knew it was a bad idea, but curiosity pushed me on. I aimed my flashlight into the corner. The beam cut through the murkiness, illuminating a haphazard pile of old tools, rusty and jagged. As I rummaged through, I spotted a straight edge, its blade dull but still intimidating. I picked it up, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. It was better than nothing. I turned toward the crack in the floor. The urge to investigate it grew stronger. What could possibly be down there? Maybe it was just a foundation issue, but the man had seemed so desperate, so lost. Perhaps the answers I was seeking lay beneath. Before I could make a decision, the shadows in the room thickened around me. I glanced over my shoulder, the unsettling feeling intensifying. As I began to edge backward, my foot caught on something. I stumbled, nearly dropping the flashlight as I regained my balance. That when I saw it, a flicker of movement along the tunnel. It was brief but real, a flash of something pale, barely discernible in the gloom. My breath caught. I couldn't be sure what I'd seen, but I had to find out. Ignoring the tremor in my hands, I stepped toward the crack with the flashlight wide open. Crackling, echoing whispers came from the tunnel's entrance. It felt like they were beckoning me. I crouched low, peering into the darkness. The air was heavy, thick with anticipation. I could see nothing, but I could feel it, an unsettling presence lurking, waiting. Then a jolt of panic shot through me. What if I wasn't alone down there? What if whatever was following me had a mind of its own? My instincts screamed to turn back, but my curiosity was stronger. I had to know. As I leaned closer, the ground beneath me shifted. A loud creak echoed through the room, and the lighting flickered again. My stomach dropped. I had overstayed my welcome. Before I could rationalize my next step, a sharp voice whispered from the shadows, "It's not safe here." I whipped around, the flashlight beam shaking violently as I turned to face the voice. A figure emerged, a woman this time. Her face was gaunt and pale, her eyes wide with fear. "You need to get out. They won't let you leave." "What do you mean? Who won't?" I demanded, adrenaline revitalizing me. But she just pointed at the tunnel, her expression pleading. Then the laughter returned, louder this time, like a mad chorus rising from the depths. I could feel the cold air swirl, thicker than before. The shadows seemed to pulse, and I was terrified to stay, yet more terrified to go. Before I could make a choice, she vanished as quickly as she had appeared. I was left gasping at the sudden emptiness. I had to act now, but what was I supposed to do? I pushed back anxiety and clutched the blade tighter. With the laughter still echoing, I had a decision to make. Either face whatever waited in the tunnel, or find a way to escape this twisted nightmare that had ensnared me. The stakes were high, and time was slipping away. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of fear in my chest. The laughter echoed in my ears, turning into a maddening drone. It was now or never. I stepped closer to the crack in the floor, feeling the air grow colder. With my flashlight gripped firmly, I crouched down, my heart pounding in my throat. As I shone the light into the crack, I saw a faint glimmer of something on the other side. It looked metallic, maybe. I leaned in, straining to get a better look. Suddenly, a sharp snapping sound pierced the silence, and instinctively, I jerked back. The shadows around me flickered, as if something had passed nearby. A low growl rumbled from the tunnel. My breath hitched, adrenaline surged. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination or something lurking in the dark. I had to choose face whatever that was, or escape while I still could. Just then, I spotted something else nearby, an old shovel half buried under dust and debris. I grabbed it, feeling its weight as it swung in my hands. A tool for digging or defense, I didn't know which, but I welcomed the sense of control. The growling grew louder, echoing within the confines of the space. I forced myself to peer into the crack again, the flashlight beam revealing more. Among the shadows, I noticed several pairs of eyes gleaming back at me. I recoiled, raising the shovel instinctively. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to project strength I didn't feel. The eyes blinked out of sight. The air went deathly still, and I felt a chill dance down my spine. Had they heard me? Were they waiting for me to make a move? With shaky hands, I took a step forward, determined to face my fears. The tunnel loomed before me, dark and foreboding. "I'm not afraid of you," I called, even though I was pretty sure that was a lie. Ignoring the growing dread, I crouched down and edged closer to the entrance of the tunnel. The light flickered, barely illuminating the path ahead. Just as I prepared to step through, a rough hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing my wrist firmly. I gasped, jerking back and raising the shovel high. "Get away from me!" My voice was louder now, laced with panic. But the grip tightened. "Please," the voice hissed, low and filled with urgency. "You don't know what you're doing." I blinked, trying to focus on the figure emerging from the shadows. It was a man, his eyes wide and frantic. Before I could respond, the laughter erupted again, vibrating through the air, drowning us both in its chaos. I felt the tremor beneath my feet, and we both stumbled backward. "We have to go. Now," he shouted, his urgency infectious. My instincts screamed to trust him, but a part of me hesitated. Who was he? I didn't have time for questions. The shadows closed in around us, and I nodded. "Lead the way." Just as he turned to run, I caught sight of movement behind him, a figure, pale and twisted, pushing through the shadows. "Run!" I shouted, as I followed him into the chaos. We tore through the tunnel, the sound of our footfalls swallowed by the darkness. I clutched the shovel tightly, its familiarity helping me fight against the rising panic. The man darted ahead, glancing back to ensure I was still there. "Keep moving," he urged, his voice strained. I picked up my pace, trying to keep up. Just then, a high-pitched wail echoed through the passage. It sliced through the air like glass, sending chills down my spine. I couldn't see what was making that sound, but I felt its weight pressing against me. "Who are you?" I called out, desperate for context. It felt wrong to run with a total stranger. "I'm just a survivor," he shot back, glancing behind him. "They're coming. We need to get to the exit." "Survivor from what?" I asked, my breath ragged. "It's not safe here. Just focus on running." He turned again and picked up speed. My heart hammered as I followed, the growls and laughter behind us merging into a terrifying symphony. I peered over my shoulder. The shadows danced ominously, but I saw nothing distinct. The fear pressed on my chest, hard to ignore. Suddenly, we reached a fork in the tunnel. "Left or right?" he yelled. "Left," I shouted, instinct kicking in. I didn't know why, but something drew me in that direction. As we veered left, I stumbled, nearly losing my balance. I caught myself and regained my footing, but not without glancing back once more. The flickering flashlight caught a glimpse of one of those pale figures, eyes glowing with hunger. They were closing in. "Keep going," he urged, his voice clipped. We rounded another corner, and the tunnel opened into a wider space. It was dimly lit, with remnants of old equipment scattered around. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed, and the smell of decay filled the air. "Here," he pointed to a heavy door at the far end of the room. "We can barricade it." I rushed toward it, adrenaline thrumming through my veins. As I reached for the door, I glanced back. That pale figure slithered into view, a twisted smile plastered across its grotesque face. It seemed to move with an unnatural speed, like it was gliding rather than running. The man yanked the door open, and we stumbled through just as the figure lunged forward. We barely managed to slam it shut, but I heard a sickening thud on the other side. What now? I panted, pressing my back against the door, my heart racing. Now we find a way out, he said, glancing around the dimly lit room. There's always an exit in these places. I looked around, trying to make sense of our surroundings. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, and I felt a sense of unease settle in. What about those things? They can't open doors, but they can break through if we don't hurry, he said, urgency lacing his voice. Just then, I noticed a large window to my left, fogged up and grimy. What about that? I pointed. He stared at it for a moment and then nodded. We might be able to break it. Before I could respond, a crackling sound pierced through the air. The noise shot through my body like ice, and I realized it was coming from the radio on the wall. That's when I saw it. A message scrawled across the glass, barely visible through the grime. It read, "Leave before they find you." Fear gripped my stomach like a vice. Those words settled over me like a dark cloud. "Let us go," I shouted, and together we rushed for the window. But as we reached it, a loud crash erupted behind us, and I turned just in time to see the door buckle. Something was coming through. I didn't think. I just reacted. With a fierce determination, I hurled my shoulder against the window, the sound of breaking glass fracturing the tense air around us. Shards cascaded downward, and through the jagged opening, the faint outline of night greeted me. "Come on," I shouted, terror making my voice rise. The man was right behind me, trying to keep pace. We scrambled through the opening, limbs scraping against the coarse edges of broken glass as we dove out into the cool air. I landed hard on the other side, rolling onto the damp grass. We escaped the room, but I barely had a moment to gasp for breath before I felt the weight of the shadows pressing in behind us. "Get up," the man urged, grabbing my arm and pulling me to my feet. "We have to keep moving." We stumbled into the night, adrenaline pushing me forward as I followed him. The cemetery surrounding the crematorium was a twisted, barren landscape of crooked gravestones, bathed in eerie moonlight. I could hear the unsettling echoes of the creatures from inside, wails of frustration mixed with the desperate cries for help. "What were those things?" I gasped, desperately trying to keep up. "Part of this place," he replied, glancing back as if expecting them to emerge from the shadows. "Lost souls. They linger, feeding off the fear. It's what they do." My pulse quickened. The stories I'd read about the crematorium's dark past flooded my mind. But even as panic surged, something curious tugged at me. "And what about you? How did you survive?" "That's not what matters right now," he replied tersely, pulling me toward what looked like a narrow path at the edge of the cemetery. "We need to find a way to cover our tracks. If they catch up, there's no telling what will happen." We ducked low, weaving through gravestones and overgrown weeds. My heart raced not just from the chase but from the overwhelming sense of dread. What had been released from the furnace? Were we truly safe even now? A sudden rustling behind us made my breath catch in my throat. "They're coming," I hissed, panic clawing at me. I glanced back and saw dark shapes shifting just beyond the light of the moon. "Keep moving," he urged again, and we quickened our pace. In our haste, I nearly tripped over a crypt, instinctively reaching out for anything to hold onto. My fingers grazed the cold stone, and a series of whispers erupted in my mind. "Jack! Help us, Jack!" I shuddered as the familiar voice wound itself around my thoughts. Fighting against it, I pushed forward, following my companion away from the cemetery and toward a dense thicket of trees. With every step, I felt the weight of those voices follow, a cacophony of longing. Finally, we broke through the underbrush and emerged onto the road that circled the crematorium. I clutched my side, my breath ragged, and looked down to find a dark stain spreading across my shirt, where glass had caught me. "Are you okay?" he asked, eyes flitting over my injury before turning back to the road ahead. There was no time for concern, just the urgency to put as much distance between us and the crematorium as possible. "I think so," I replied, but the heaviness in my chest didn't ease. Even now, I could hear them, the whispers becoming a low hum of desperation. "Focus," We need to keep moving, he urged, tugging me forward. I felt every inch of my fear pulse in rhythm with the wind, slapping against us like an angry tide. We ran until my legs burned, darkness pressing close, stealing my breath. At last, we reached a small clearing where the trees thinned out. I turned to look back, half expecting to see figures emerge from the shadows, but all I saw were the silhouettes of crumbling graves against the moonlit sky. Are we safe? I asked, panting heavily. For now, he replied, but the uncertainty in his voice sent a shiver up my spine. But we can't stop. It's not over. They'll always be looking for a way back in. I thought about what I had seen, the figure in pain, the desperate whispers, the twisted faces of those lost. The heart of that crematorium pulsed with unanswered questions. And as much as I wanted to escape, I felt that I was still intertwined with it. Who were those people? I asked, a little more insistent. What did we leave behind? He hesitated, his gaze drifting to the woods. I don't know, he admitted. What I do know is we have to keep moving. They'll find you if you let them. I nodded, but a part of me yearned to understand. Life would never be the same after what had happened tonight. As we trudged on, uncertainty settled in my gut like heavy stone. I moved to a different city after that. Sometimes I wonder if my companion is still out there, if those things still haunt that place. But mostly I try not to think about it.